When I think about what type of world we're leaving behind for our little girls and boys, I think about the brave and powerful women who came before us, the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement. And Women's March has ignited millions of sheroes. But unlike before, they hear our voice. Elizabeth Margaret Chandler was born in 1807 in the state of Delaware. Growing up, she attended a Quaker school that practiced anti-slavery. Elizabeth had lost both parents at the early age of 9, and just a few years later, she began to write poetry and literature of compassion, and in later writings of anti-slavery. Elizabeth went on to co-found the first anti-slavery society. She led by telling her friends to join her through her readings and refrain from purchasing produce from Southern slave owners. She was a freedom fighter in her own right. And what I've come to understand is that strong convictions are rooted in hardships and pain. Losing both parents did not stop her from advocating for the free produce movement and against slavery. Elizabeth didn't just do this on her own. She went out and she did the work, and she brought others in. She's also known for the piece, "Am I not a woman and a sister?" And I ask that question this time to my fellow sisters. Am I not a woman and a sister? Will you stand with me as I stand with you?
To me, intersectional feminism means that if you're a feminist, then you fight for all women, not just women who look like you, not just women who talk like you, not just women who get to live like you. And I realized that I am a white, college-educated, currently middle-class woman, and I, out of all women, have the most privilege. I'm heterosexual, I'm cisgendered. I don't have to deal with the other forms of oppression that my sisters have to deal with. And so I have to figure out ways to both mitigate my own privilege and simultaneously try to share it with as many other women as I can.
It's the only type of feminism. So I think that if it's not intersectional, it cannot exist. Like, you cannot claim to be a feminist if you are only fighting for one type of feminism. I'm fighting for the woman who stays at home. I'm fighting for the woman who has 7 different kids and can't stay at home. I'm fighting for the gay, lesbian, transgender. I'm fighting for all types of women. And to me, the intersectional, it just makes us so much more powerful. It makes sure that we are looking out for the least among us, which is what we're supposed to do. I think I was a women's studies minor, and I did a lot of researching feminism, and one of the things that frustrated me about the past feminism is that they were willing to throw others under the bus to get what they needed. So when it was time to get the vote, white women were willing to take people of color out of that, and so that they could get the vote. I don't want us to do that anymore. We march for all of us. We're working for all of us.
I don't have to choose between my race and my gender. I'm a black woman, and my gender is just as important to me as my race, and my race as my gender. And that is why I joined Women's March, because for the first time, I felt like that I did not have to choose and that my voice could be heard. Intersectional feminism means to me that every voice can be heard, regardless of your race, your gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, and if you're abled or disabled. Claudette Colvin was born in 1939 in segregated Montgomery, Alabama. And as a teenager, she attended Booker T. Washington High School, and she was a member of the NAACP Youth Council. Claudette traveled to and from school with public transportation, as her parents did not own a car. Segregated bus practices in 1955 were that blacks had to sit in the back. And when the front of the bus became full, blacks were to give up their seats for whites. Claudette's readings of sheroes in high school resonated with her own pain and suffering of her family's experiences of oppression. Blacks were banned from public dressing rooms and had to draw their own foot on a brown paper bag for sizing. On March 2nd, 1955, Claudette was traveling home from school, and she was inspired by what she was learning what was then called Negro History Month, studying black leaders such as Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. and as the bus became full on her ride home, she was told to get up from her seat for a white woman. This was 9 months before Rosa Parks, and in the same city. Rosa Parks sat down, but she stood tall against the racist segregation of the South, and Claudette, at the young age of 16, did the same. She refused to give up her seat for a white woman, and was then forced off the bus, arrested, and taken to jail. But Claudette understood her constitutional right had been violated, and she took the case to trial. Nearly a year and a half later, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Claudette's favor that bus segregation was unconstitutional in the state of Alabama and Georgia.
Thing that I'm just as fired up about of any of this is the education of white women. 54% of white women did not vote for Hillary Clinton. Why? You know, are we so beholden to what our husbands and our boyfriends and our brothers and our, drunk uncles want us to do that we have to go along with that game?
In a way. And I remember election night in the way that I think that everyone remembers election night, where I think that for a lot of us it's like that, like, where were you when that happened? And I had flown down to Texas to spend election night with my best friend because we thought we would be celebrating. And we had Hillary Clinton t-shirts, and we bought a bottle of champagne, and we went over to a friend of hers' house to have a viewing party, and then we just watched, like, with our jaws dropped. And she and I are both from Michigan, and I remember watching returns from Michigan, and I kept saying, like, don't worry, Washtenaw County hasn't come in yet, Wayne County hasn't come in yet, like that's gonna save us, that's where my mom lives, like, that's, like, it's gonna turn, like, Michigan won't do this to us.
Because it devastated me. When I remember going to bed and I was crying. I went to bed before it was all over. And I was crying and I was like, I can't believe this happened. And my fiance, he came in the room and he's like, I'm so sorry. And then he says, I didn't vote. And I couldn't even, in that moment, I was so upset at him. I'm like, I blamed him for Trump. Like, I was like, it's all your fault. It's people like you. He's like, I just didn't think we would make that choice.
And then they did. And I just started crying. And I called my mom, and, like, she was crying. And the next day I had to fly back to Ohio, which had also went for Donald Trump. And I remember sitting on that plane and, like, looking out the window and just thinking, like, what am I gonna do? Like, what is gonna happen next?
I'm proud of my little sister. Her husband is a Rush Limbaugh listening, Trump, make America great again dude. And it's funny, she just won't discuss politics with him, ever. And we're always thinking, oh God, how could you go along with this? And she's like, I don't. My vote cancels his.
And, like, I also had all of this family stuff going on where we were dealing with, the murder of one of my cousins. And the day after the election, I was in the car and I was driving home from the airport, and my mom called me because there had been a pretrial hearing and they had let him go and dropped all of the charges against him. And I just remember being like, the world is literally falling apart. And then the next day, and I'm getting choked up here, the next day I saw something about the Women's March. And I remember I called my mom again and I said, we have to go to this. And I called my sister who lives in Chicago and I was like, we're going to Washington, D.C. This is the only thing that makes sense right now.
when Barack Obama was elected for his first term, I was so, like, not even jubilant. I was like, I had like tears in my eyes, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're actually doing something good for a change. Like, we've actually done something that like is going to be meaningful, and there's going to be impactful change. And I was really hopeful for so many of the things that I had hoped were going to come along. And for 8 years, those things just kept happening. And I just felt so good about the future. And then when this election happened, I do remember sitting in the room as watching the polls come in and just like watching the faces drop.
What we're learning right now with Trump in office is there was a lot about this country that we closed our eyes to. There's a lot of hatred, and it makes me angry.
Shadows disappear. Let us go this moment here. This is a call to arms. This is a call to arms. You know.
So I went to the march in DC. I went with a group called Queen Bees. It was like a beautiful moment. I cried, I laughed. But the sign I took, it's had a picture of my kiddo. She is 6 years old, and it said, "I march because she matters." My child means the world to me, and I'm sure most parents would agree their kid means the world to them. And I want her to be as free in society as possible. I want her to know she can do anything and everything that she wants to do. And I march to make sure that people know she matters, to make sure that the people know I matter, to make sure people know that you matter.
Hopeful. And I just remember thinking, like, this has to continue. Like, we have to find a way to translate this into action.
I march for my son who's 21 years old. I don't want to have to fear for his life. I don't want any Black woman to have to fear for their child every day as they walk out the door and wonder if they're going to be able to come home. I march for my daughter who's 10. I want her to feel like she can be anything that she wants to be. After the presidential election, she came to me and she said, "Mom, why don't boys support girls like the girls support the boys? I don't want any other little girl to have to feel that way."
Just angry, but unbelievably motivated. And when I got to work, I work at a church. When I got to work, the pastor was like, "What are we going to do? Like, there has to be a way to push this into movement." And I was like, there's going to be a way to push this into movement. And the next day I started a group at church for women to come together and sort of lament this thing that happened. And then all of a sudden the Women's March was announced. And we were like, we're going to go to that and we're going to do that because it feels like real and meaningful action.
For the badass of it. It's been a long time coming. You know, our women in this country and all over the world have taken a backseat to men, and that's just what it's about.
Women are the backbone to our families, our communities, and to our country, and yet we are suffering the most. The equal pay gap of white, black, and brown women from our male counterparts hurts our families. Disparities of incarcerated black women and thousands of immigrant women and children are detained. In 2018, we will dismantle the patriarchal systems that oppress all women in our country. Their time is up. Edith is why I march. Edith is why I fight for social justice every day. Her story is one of strength, grace, and love. She has a family and children, similar to the age of my own children. My feminism is to fight for Edith just as hard as I fight for gender equality and racial justice. She is my sister, and we are all sisters in this movement. It is time we protect women and children in immigration detention centers and their families from being ripped apart. We can no longer afford to be divided. Our oppression is intertwined, and no one is free until we are all free. Edith's story is one of too many who at any moment can have their families interrupted by the injustices and discrimination that women inherently absorb. Edith is not an unsung hero. Edith is a hero. Her voice has been heard. Edith's story and so many others is why Women's March has turned a historical moment in 2017 to a movement. Last year, who would have imagined we would have organized and mobilized over 20,000 throughout the state and onward to Washington, D.C. as one of the top 10 states to mobilize in the country. And we will take that same collective energy and power straight to the polls. We need more women and femmes running for office who stand up for all voices. We will lift each other through our shared experiences, register new voters, engage impacted communities, and advocate for more women and progressive candidates. We will create historical numbers directly to the polls and vote them out. We are the answer.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Edith Espinal. Quiero agradecerles por tomarse el tiempo de ver este video y de escuchar mi historia. Estoy en santuario por 111 días porque tengo una deportación. Estoy en la iglesia Columbus Mennonite Church aquí en Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, y quiero hablarles en este momento como mujer, como madre, como hermana. Y quiero decirles que me duele en el corazón de no estar en casa con mis hijos, de que esta nueva administración quiere separar nuestras familias. Quiero pedirles a todos los inmigrantes y refugiados que nos apoyemos y que nos unamos como personas para luchar con esta nueva administración, para hacerles saber que nosotros estamos aquí, que no nos vamos a dejar, no nos vamos a callar y no nos vamos a ir. Porque Dios nos bendecirá en esta lucha y vamos a ganar. Porque nosotros tenemos el derecho como mujer de luchar por nuestros hijos, de luchar por nuestras familias. Tenemos el derecho de que esta nueva administración nos dé una oportunidad de estar aquí con nuestros hijos, con nuestras familias. No debemos permitirle que siga separando nuestras familias. Quiero pedirles a todos su apoyo y darle las gracias por escucharme. Por favor, hay que unirnos como personas para luchar. Todos unidos venceremos. También quisiera decirles que ¿qué sentirían ustedes si fueran separados de sus hijos? Por favor, apóyenos. Quiero dar gracias y que Dios los bendiga.
Will you stand with me as I stand with you?
No one is free until we are all free.